In a small, quiet town surrounded by thick woods and twisting roads, life moved at a slow pace. The townsfolk were used to the calm rhythm of their days, where nothing much seemed to happen beyond the usual routines. But deep within those woods, far from prying eyes, secrets lingered, secrets waiting to be uncovered. This is where our story begins. One chilly autumn evening, when the sun had begun its descent and painted the sky in hues of orange and purple, a group of motorcycle enthusiasts, known as the Iron Shadows, decided to explore an unfamiliar trail. These bikers weren't just thrill seekers, they were close-knit friends who loved adventure. Their rides often took them through winding paths, but this time, something felt different. The air carried an unusual stillness, and the forest seemed quieter than usual, almost as if it was holding its breath. As they rode deeper into the woods, the path grew narrower, flanked by towering trees that blocked out most of the fading sunlight. Shadows stretched long across the ground, making everything look surreal. It wasn't until they rounded a bend that they noticed something odd, a lone figure sitting beside what appeared to be a crudely made wooden box. At first glance, it looked like a coffin, though no one wanted to say it aloud. Beside it sat a dog, its fur matted with dirt and leaves, looking utterly exhausted yet strangely alert. The bikers slowed down, exchanging puzzled glances. What was a dog doing out here in the middle of nowhere? And why was it guarding what looked like a coffin? Curiosity got the better of them, and they parked their bikes nearby. The leader of the group, Jake, stepped forward cautiously. He was a tall man with a rugged beard and piercing blue eyes, always quick to take charge in uncertain situations. As he approached, the dog growled softly, its hackles raised. Jake stopped in his tracks, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "It's okay," Jake said gently, his voice steady despite the strange scene before him. "We're not going to hurt you." For a moment, the dog stared at him, its dark eyes filled with a mix of fear and determination. Then slowly, it relaxed, though it didn't move from its spot beside the coffin. Jake knelt down, extending a hand toward the animal. To everyone's surprise, the dog sniffed his fingers, then leaned slightly into his touch. It was clear the poor creature was starving and dehydrated, but there was something else about it, an intensity, a purposefulness, that made it stand out. Jake turned to his friends who had gathered around now. "This isn't just some stray," he murmured. "Look at it. It's protecting whatever's inside that box." His words sent a shiver down their spines. None of them could explain why a dog would guard a coffin so fiercely, or why someone would leave such a thing in the middle of the woods. They tried to coax the dog away, offering bits of food and water, but it refused to budge. Every time they came too close to the coffin, the dog growled again, low and warning. It was as if it had been given a mission, one it intended to carry, out no matter what. The bikers debated whether they should leave the dog and continue their ride. After all, they hadn't planned for anything like this, but something about the situation tugged at their hearts. Maybe it was the way the dog looked at them, with pleading eyes as if begging for help. Or maybe it was the eerie presence of the coffin itself. Whatever it was, they couldn't bring themselves to walk away. "Let's check it out," suggested Mark, the youngest member of the group. He had a mop of curly hair and a knack for getting into trouble, but his curiosity often led to interesting discoveries. "I mean, we can't just leave it here, right?" Reluctantly, the others agreed. Jake crouched beside the coffin, studying it closely. It was handmade, clearly crafted by someone without professional tools. The wood was rough and splintered, and crude carvings adorned the surface. Some of the symbols looked like random scratches, while others resembled letters or shapes. None of them could decipher their meaning. But the effort that had gone into creating the coffin suggested it held great significance. "What do you think is inside?" asked Sarah, the only woman in the group. She had sharp instincts and a no-nonsense attitude, which often balanced out Mark's impulsiveness. Her question hung heavy in the air, unanswered. No one wanted to admit it, but the thought of opening the coffin filled them with dread. Still, they couldn't ignore the possibility that it might contain something important, or someone. The dog's behavior hinted at a deeper mystery, one that demanded answers. As night began to fall, casting the forest in shadow, the bikers realized they had two choices: leave the dog and the coffin behind or investigate further. Either way, they knew their decision would change the course of their evening, and possibly their lives. Little did they know, the dog's actions were about to lead them on a journey they'd never forget, one that would test their courage, compassion, and resolve. And so, with the dog watching them intently, the bikers prepared to uncover the truth. Whatever lay ahead, they were ready, for better or worse. After deciding to investigate further, the group gathered around the mysterious coffin, their flashlights casting shaky beams of light onto the rough wooden surface. The dog, still sitting vigilantly beside it, let out a soft whimper as if sensing their intentions. Jake knelt down again, his fingers brushing against the cold, uneven planks. He hesitated for a moment, glancing at his friends, who stood in tense silence. None of them knew what they might find inside or whether they truly wanted to know. "Are we sure about this?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She adjusted the strap of her backpack, her sharp eyes scanning the dark woods around them. "This feels off." "It's not like we have much of a choice," Mark replied, trying to sound braver than he felt. "That dog isn't going anywhere, and neither is this thing." He pointed toward the coffin with his flashlight, the beam trembling slightly. "Besides, don't you want to know what's inside?" Jake nodded slowly, though doubt lingered in his expression. "If we're doing this, we do it carefully," he said firmly. "No sudden moves. Let's see if we can figure out how to open it without scaring the dog, or ourselves." With that, they began examining the coffin more closely. It was clear that whoever had made it hadn't used nails or screws. Instead, the lid rested loosely on top, held in place by gravity and perhaps some makeshift hinges fashioned from rope. The crude carvings etched into the wood caught their attention once more. Some looked like random scratches, while others resembled symbols or letters, perhaps initials or a name. One carving stood out, a heart-shaped design with what appeared to be a small star inside. "What do you think these mean?" Sarah asked, tracing the outline of the heart with her finger. "Do they tell us anything about who made this or why?" Before anyone could answer, the dog suddenly stood up, its ears perked and its tail stiff. It barked sharply, startling the group. They froze, their flashlights swinging wildly as they scanned the surrounding trees. For a moment it seemed as though someone, or something, was watching them from the shadows. But after several tense seconds, there was nothing but the rustling of leaves in the wind. "It's okay," Jake reassured the dog, placing a calming hand on its head. "We're not leaving yet." Encouraged by the dog's reaction, or lack thereof, they returned their focus to the coffin. Using a pocket knife, Jake carefully pried at one corner of the lid, wincing at the creaking sound it made. The others leaned in closer, holding their breath as the lid shifted slightly. When it finally came loose, they paused, steeling themselves for whatever lay beneath. Inside, they didn't find a body, as they half expected, but rather a collection of personal items neatly arranged. There was a delicate silver necklace with a tiny pendant shaped like a crescent moon, a worn stuffed bear missing one eye, and a folded piece of paper tucked underneath everything else. The sight of these objects sent a wave of confusion through the group. What kind of coffin held belongings instead of remains? "Is this a keepsake box?" Mark wondered aloud, scratching his head. "Why would someone bury this stuff out here?" Jake picked up the folded paper, unfolding it carefully. His brow furrowed as he read the handwritten note inside. "It's a message," he said quietly, his voice tinged with disbelief. "Listen to this." He cleared his throat and began reading aloud. "To whoever finds this, my name is Emily. If you're reading this, I'm probably in trouble. Please help me. I don't have much time left, but I need someone to know what happened to me. Take care of Max, he'll lead you to me if you follow him. Don't give up on me." The note ended abruptly, leaving the group speechless. Their eyes darted between each other, then to the dog, who was now staring at them intently. It was as if he understood every word they'd just read. "That's his name," Sarah whispered, pointing at the dog. Max. She wrote about him. A heavy silence settled over the group as the weight of the situation sank in. This wasn't just a random stray guarding a mysterious object. It was a loyal companion trying to protect the last traces of someone he loved, someone who desperately needed help. We have to do something, Jake said finally, his jaw tightening with resolve. If she's still alive, we can't just leave her out here. But where do we even start? Mark asked, his earlier bravado replaced by uncertainty. There's no address, no directions, just a dog and a note. Jake glanced at Max, who was wagging his tail cautiously, as if sensing their determination. Maybe we don't need directions, he said thoughtfully. Look at him. He knows something. He's been leading us all along. At that moment, Max stood up and took a few steps forward, looking back over his shoulder as if urging them to follow. The bikers exchanged hesitant looks, unsure of what to do next. Following a dog into the unknown depths of the forest sounded risky, and maybe even foolish, but they couldn't ignore the possibility that Emily was counting on them. We've come this far, Sarah said firmly, slinging her backpack over her shoulder. Let's see where he takes us. With renewed resolve, the group mounted their bikes, keeping a close eye on Max as he trotted ahead. The dog moved with purpose, occasionally stopping to glance back and ensure they were still following. As they ventured deeper into the woods, the path grew narrower and darker, the trees closing in around them like silent sentinels. The only sounds were the crunch of tires on gravel and the occasional hoot of an owl in the distance. Despite the eerie atmosphere, none of them dared to turn back. They had made a promise, to Emily, to Max, and to themselves, that they wouldn't give up until they found answers. And so, guided by the unwavering loyalty of a dog who refused to abandon his human companion, they pressed onward, unaware of the shocking discovery that awaited them. The forest grew denser as the group followed Max, their bikes navigating the uneven terrain with increasing difficulty. The narrow trail twisted and turned unpredictably, forcing them to slow down to avoid collisions with low-hanging branches or hidden roots. The moonlight filtered weakly through the thick canopy above, casting faint, dappled shadows on the ground. It was hard to shake the feeling that they were being watched, though every time they stopped to listen, the only sounds were the rustling of leaves and the distant calls of nocturnal creatures. Max trotted steadily ahead, his movements deliberate and confident, as if he knew exactly where he was going. Occasionally, he would pause and glance back at the bikers, his tail wagging slightly to encourage them to keep moving. His loyalty and determination were palpable, and it spurred the group onward despite their growing unease. They couldn't help but wonder how long Max had been out here alone, searching for someone who might understand the urgency of his mission. After what felt like hours, the dog led them to a clearing where an old abandoned cabin stood shrouded in darkness. Its silhouette loomed against the night sky, eerie and foreboding. The structure looked like it had been untouched for decades. Its wooden walls were warped and splintered, its windows shattered, and its roof sagged under the weight of time. Vines crept up the sides, reclaiming the building piece by piece, as if nature itself wanted to erase all traces of human presence. "This is it," Jake said softly, cutting the engine of his bike. The others followed suit, the sudden silence amplifying the tension in the air. "He's bringing us here for a reason." As they dismounted their bikes, Max approached the cabin cautiously, sniffing the ground and pawing at the base of the door. He barked once, then looked back at the group, his eyes wide and expectant. It was clear he wanted them to go inside, but none of them moved immediately. There was something unsettling about the place, a sense of decay mixed with an almost suffocating stillness. "Do you think she's in there?" Sarah asked, her voice barely audible over the soft hum of insects buzzing nearby. She tightened her grip on the flashlight in her hand, its beam wavering slightly as she aimed it toward the darkened entrance. "I don't know," Jake admitted, stepping closer to the cabin. "But we won't find out standing out here." Mark hesitated, glancing nervously at the surrounding trees. What if whoever took her is still in there? We're not exactly prepared for this kind of thing." Jake turned to face him, his expression resolute. We came this far because of Max and because of Emily. If there's even a chance she's alive, we owe it to her to check. But if anyone wants to stay behind, I get it. No one spoke for a moment, the gravity of the situation sinking in. Finally, Sarah broke the silence. We stick together. Whatever happens, we don't split up. With that agreement, the group cautiously approached the cabin, their flashlights cutting through the oppressive darkness. The wooden steps leading up to the porch creaked ominously under their weight, and the door hung crookedly on its hinges, as if it hadn't been opened in years. Jake pushed it gently, and it swung inward with a loud groan that echoed through the empty space. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the musty smell of decay. Their flashlights revealed a scene frozen in time. Overturned furniture, broken glass scattered across the floor, and cobwebs clinging to every surface. Yet, amidst the chaos, there were signs of recent activity. Fresh footprints marred the dusty floor, and cigarette butts lay crushed near the doorway. Someone, or multiple people, had been here recently. "This doesn't look good," Mark muttered, shining his light on the wall opposite the entrance. What he saw made his breath catch in his throat. Tacked to the wall were dozens of photographs, each one depicting the same young girl smiling brightly despite the faded quality of the prints. Beneath one photo, written in shaky handwriting, were the words, "Emily, don't forget me." Sarah stepped forward, her heart pounding as she examined the images more closely. "This has to be her," she whispered, her voice trembling. "She looks so young." Jake joined her, studying the photos intently. "There's more," he said grimly, pointing to a series of newspaper clippings pinned beside the pictures. Each article detailed a different missing persons case, some dating back years. One headline stood out: "Local teen vanishes without a trace." Whoever did this... Sarah trailed off, unable to finish her sentence. The implications were horrifying. Their search continued, and they soon discovered other disturbing clues. Maps were spread across a rickety table, marked with red circles and lines connecting various locations deep within the woods. Some areas were labeled with cryptic notes such as "last seen here" or "search failed." Among the papers, they found a leather-bound journal, its cover worn and cracked from use. Jake opened it carefully, flipping through the pages. The entries were erratic, filled with rambling thoughts and fragmented sentences. The writer, presumably the person responsible for the cabin's contents, spoke of guilt, obsession, and fear. In one passage, he mentioned Emily by name, referring to her as the girl who shouldn't have run. Another entry read, "I didn't mean for it to go this far. She was supposed to stay safe, but now she's gone, and I can't fix it. They'll blame me when they find out, but she's still alive, I'm sure of it. I just need more time." The chilling words sent a wave of dread through the group. Whoever this man was, he clearly believed Emily was still alive, but also seemed dangerously unhinged. "This guy's unstable," Jake said, closing the journal with a snap. "And if he's involved, we need to tread carefully." Max, who had been quiet during their exploration, suddenly perked up. He padded toward the back of the cabin, stopping near a trapdoor embedded in the floor. With a bark, he scratched at the wood, demanding their attention. The group exchanged uneasy glances before Jake knelt down to inspect it. "There's something down there," he murmured, lifting the heavy latch. The scent of damp earth wafted up as the door creaked open, revealing a set of rickety stairs. "Descending into darkness, should we—" Mark began, trailing off uncertainly. "We have to," Jake replied firmly, grabbing a flashlight. "If Emily's down there, we can't leave without checking." One by one, they descended into the basement, their footsteps echoing in the confined space. The air grew colder and heavier the deeper they went, and the beams of their flashlights revealed shelves stacked with supplies, canned food, bottled water, blankets. It was as if someone had prepared for an extended stay underground. At the far end of the room, they spotted another makeshift coffin, similar to the one they'd found earlier. This one, however, was locked with a rusty padlock. Max growled softly, his hackles rising as he stared at it. "Do you think—" Sarah started, her voice shaking. Before anyone could answer, a noise from above startled them. The sound of footsteps approaching the cabin. The sound of footsteps above them froze the group in place. Each creak of the wooden floorboard seemed to echo louder in the confined basement, sending shivers down their spines. The bikers exchanged panicked glances, their flashlights trembling slightly as they aimed them toward the stairs leading up to the main cabin. Max, who had been growling softly at the locked coffin, suddenly went silent, his ears perked and his body tense. It was clear he sensed danger too. "We need to move," Jake whispered urgently, his voice barely audible. "Now." But before they could act, the footsteps grew closer, accompanied by the unmistakable sound of a door being pushed open upstairs. Whoever, or whatever, was up there wasn't trying to hide their presence anymore. The group instinctively pressed themselves against the walls of the basement, holding their breath as they listened intently. "Is anyone here?" A gruff voice called out from above, followed by the scrape of furniture being moved. The tone was harsh, almost accusatory, as if the speaker already suspected intruders. Jake signaled for silence, raising a hand to keep everyone still. His mind raced, trying to calculate their options. They were trapped in the basement with no clear exit, besides the stairs, and those were now blocked by whoever had entered the cabin. If they tried to leave, they'd risk being seen, but staying put wasn't much safer. Sooner or later, the intruder would discover the trapdoor and find them. Max, however, had other ideas. Without warning, he bolted toward the stairs, barking loudly enough to shake the entire basement. The sudden noise startled everyone, including the person upstairs whose heavy footsteps paused momentarily before rushing toward the trapdoor. "What the hell?" the voice growled, followed by the thud of boots descending the stairs. Reacting quickly, Jake grabbed a nearby piece of broken wood, a jagged plank that had once been part of a shelf, and stepped into the shadows near the bottom of the staircase. As the figure emerged from above, silhouetted against the dim light filtering through the open trapdoor, Jake swung the makeshift weapon with all his strength. There was a dull thud as the plank connected with the intruder's head, and the man crumpled to the ground with a groan. For a split second, the group stood frozen, unsure of what to do next. Then Sarah rushed forward, grabbing the flashlight she'd dropped earlier and shining it on the fallen man. He was middle-aged, with unkempt hair and dirt-streaked clothes that suggested he'd been living rough for some time. His face was contorted, in pain, but even in the dim light there was something unsettling about his expression, something wild and unhinged. "Who are you?" Jake demanded, keeping his distance but gripping the plank tightly in case the man tried anything. The stranger blinked slowly, dazed from the blow. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and raspy. "You shouldn't have come here," he muttered, his words slurred. "She's not yours to save." "Emily," Sarah said sharply, stepping closer. "Where is she? What have you done with her?" At the mention of Emily's name, the man's eyes widened, and he struggled to sit up despite his obvious injury. "I didn't hurt her," he insisted, though his tone lacked conviction. "She ran off. Wouldn't listen. I tried to protect her, but she wouldn't stay." His rambling only deepened the group's unease. Mark knelt beside him cautiously, searching his pockets for anything useful. He found a set of keys which jingled faintly as he held them up triumphantly. "Maybe these will unlock that coffin," he suggested, nodding toward the mysterious box at the back of the basement. Jake hesitated, torn between wanting answers and fearing what they might find inside. Finally, he nodded. "Let's see what's in there." With Max trailing closely behind, the group approached the coffin, their flashlights casting jittery beams of light across its surface. Using the keys, Mark fumbled with the rusty padlock until it finally clicked open. The lid creaked as they lifted it, revealing yet another collection of personal items: a tattered journal, a bracelet engraved with tiny stars, and a small photograph of Emily smiling brightly alongside Max. Beneath these objects lay another note, this one written in shaky handwriting. "If you're reading this, I'm sorry. I couldn't wait any longer. I'm heading to the quarry. Please, please come find me." "The quarry," Sarah repeated, her voice trembling with urgency. "That's where she's going, or where she thinks she'll be safe." Jake clenched his fists, his jaw tightening with determination. Then, that's where we're headed next. Before leaving, they secured the man with duct tape they found in the basement, ensuring he couldn't follow or alert anyone else. Though none of them felt comfortable leaving him alone, they knew every second counted if they were going to reach Emily in time. Max led the way once again, his energy renewed as if he understood they were closing in on his beloved companion. The journey to the quarry was fraught with tension. The forest seemed darker and more menacing than ever, the trees looming like silent sentinels watching their every move. Every rustle of leaves or snap of a twig made them jump, their nerves stretched thin. Yet Max never wavered, guiding them steadily toward their destination. When they finally reached the edge of the quarry, the sight before them took their breath away. Below, in the moonlit expanse of rocky terrain, stood a lone figure pacing anxiously. Beside him sat Emily, bound to a chair and gagged, her head drooping as if she were barely conscious. The man muttered to himself, occasionally glancing around nervously as if expecting someone or something to appear. "That must be Victor," Jake whispered, recognizing the description from the journal entries they'd read earlier. "He's the one who wrote those notes," Max whimpered softly, straining against an invisible leash as if desperate to leap down and reach Emily. Jake placed a calming hand on the dog's back, signaling for patience. "We can't just rush in," he said quietly. "We need a plan." Sarah nodded, her sharp instincts kicking in. "There are 4 of us. We can surround him quietly and take him by surprise. Once he's distracted, Max can go to Emily." Agreeing on the strategy, the group split up, circling the quarry to approach from different angles. Their movements were slow and deliberate, each step calculated to avoid detection. When they were in position, Jake gave the signal, and they sprang into action. Victor barely had time to react before the bikers converged on him, pinning him to the ground. He thrashed wildly, shouting incoherently, but his efforts were futile against their combined strength. Meanwhile, Max bolted forward, racing toward Emily with unbridled joy. She stirred weakly, her eyes fluttering open as the dog leapt into her lap, licking her face frantically. "Max," she croaked, tears streaming down her cheeks as she hugged him tightly. Her voice was hoarse, but the relief in her expression was undeniable. As Jake untied her bonds and removed the gag, Emily collapsed into his arms, sobbing uncontrollably. "Thank you," she whispered over and over again. "Thank you for finding me." Though exhausted and shaken, the group knew they couldn't linger. With Victor subdued and Emily safe, they began the long journey back to civilization, guided by the unwavering loyalty of a dog who refused to give up on the girl he loved. The moment Emily was freed from her restraints, the tension that had gripped the group began to ease, but only slightly. Her frail frame and tear-streaked face spoke volumes about the ordeal she'd endured. Jake helped her stand, his arm firmly, supporting her as she wobbled on unsteady legs. Max stayed glued to her side, his tail wagging furiously as he nuzzled her hand, ensuring she knew he hadn't abandoned her. "Are you okay?" Sarah asked gently, kneeling beside Emily to check for injuries. "Can you walk?" Emily nodded weakly, though her voice was barely audible. I think so," she whispered, clutching Max tightly as if afraid he might disappear again. Just don't let him take me back." Her words sent a chill through the group. They glanced at Victor, who was still pinned to the ground by Mark and another biker, his struggles growing weaker but no less desperate. His eyes darted between Emily and the others, wild with panic and something else. Guilt, perhaps, or fear of being caught. Jake tightened his grip on Emily's shoulder reassuringly. "You're safe now," he said firmly. "We won't let anything happen to you." But even as he spoke, the reality of their situation began to sink in. They were miles away from civilization, deep in the woods, with an injured and unstable man in tow. The night was far from over, and they needed to act quickly to ensure everyone made it out safely. "We need to get moving," Jake instructed, glancing up at the sky. The moon hung low, signaling that dawn was still hours away. "If we stay here too long, we risk running into more trouble," or worse, getting lost when it gets darker. With that, the group sprang into action. Mark and Sarah worked together to bind Victor's hands securely behind his back, using the duct tape they'd brought along. Though he protested loudly, his threats fell on deaf ears. The bikers weren't taking any chances, not after what they'd seen in the cabin and basement. Once Victor was immobilized, they hoisted him onto his feet, half dragging him toward the bikes. Meanwhile, Jake focused on Emily, helping her regain her strength. She leaned heavily on him, her steps slow and uncertain, but her determination was evident. Every few moments, she would stop to hug Max, burying her face in his fur as if drawing comfort from his presence. It was clear the bond between them was unbreakable, a lifeline that had kept her going through unimaginable hardship. As they retraced their path through the forest, the journey felt both familiar and surreal. The same winding trails and towering trees that had seemed ominous earlier now offered a sense of relief, a promise of escape. Max led the way once again, his energy renewed despite the long night. Occasionally, he would pause to glance back at Emily, making sure she was keeping up. Each time she gave him a small, grateful smile, her gratitude shining through her exhaustion. The ride back proved challenging, especially for Emily. She hadn't eaten or rested properly in days, and the physical toll of her captivity was evident. Jake insisted she ride with him, holding her securely as they navigated the rough terrain. Max followed closely behind, trotting alongside Jake's bike with surprising agility. His unwavering loyalty never faltered, even as the miles stretched. By the time they reached the edge of the forest, the first hints of dawn were beginning to break. Golden light filtered through the trees, casting long shadows across the ground. For the first time since they'd discovered the coffin, the group allowed themselves to feel a flicker of hope. Civilization wasn't far now, and with it came safety, warmth, and answers. Their arrival at a nearby ranger station marked the end of their harrowing journey. The sight of the small wooden building, lit warmly by the morning sun, brought tears of relief to Emily's eyes. Jake helped her dismount, steadying her as she took her first steps onto solid ground in what felt like an eternity. Max bounded, ahead, barking joyfully as if announcing their return to the world. Inside the station, a startled park ranger listened intently as Jake recounted their story. Emily sat quietly beside Max, wrapped in a blanket one of the bikers had retrieved from their gear. Her gaze drifted to the floor as Jake described how they'd found her note, followed Max to the cabin, and eventually rescued her from the quarry. Though she remained silent, her gratitude was palpable, expressed through the occasional squeeze of Max's paw or a soft pat on his head. Once the authorities were alerted, things moved quickly. Victor was handed over to local law enforcement, who promised a thorough investigation into his actions. From the snippets of information shared by Emily, delivered haltingly between sips of water, it became clear that Victor had been obsessed with protecting her, convinced that the outside world posed a threat. But his methods had turned dangerous, culminating in her abduction and confinement. As the hours passed, Emily grew stronger, her voice steadier as she recounted details of her captivity. She explained how Max had managed to escape during one of Victor's brief absences, carrying the makeshift coffin filled with her belongings as proof of her plight. His instincts had guided him to the bikers, knowing somehow that they could help. "He never left me," Emily said softly, stroking Max's head as tears welled in her eyes. "Even when I thought I was alone, he was there. He saved me." Her words echoed in the hearts of everyone present. The bikers exchanged proud smiles, knowing they had played a part in reuniting Emily with her loyal companion. Their adventure had started as a simple ride through the woods but had transformed into something far greater, an act of courage, compassion, and unity. By midday, Emily's family arrived at the station, their faces lighting up with joy and disbelief as they embraced her tightly. Max barked happily, wagging his tail as he basked in the love surrounding them. For the first time in days, Emily looked truly at peace, surrounded by those who cared about her most. As the bikers prepared to leave, Emily approached them, her expression filled with gratitude. Thank you, she said, her voice steady and heartfelt. I don't know how I'll ever repay you for what you've done. Jake smiled warmly, placing a hand on her shoulder. Just take care of yourself and Max, he replied. That's all the thanks we need. With that, the Iron Shadows mounted their bikes, ready to return to their lives. But they knew this experience would stay with them forever, a reminder that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can lead to the greatest discoveries. And as they rode off into the distance, the image of Max and Emily standing together under the morning sun lingered in their minds, a testament to the power of love and loyalty.